Welcome to Macon Memories. This is Lynda Wright, and I'm at Randolph-Macon College on May the 28th, 2011. My guest today is Dr. T. McNider Simpson III, class of 1949. Dr. Simpson, can you give us a little background and tell us about your family's connection to Randolph-Macon College?
Well, it goes back a bit. My grandfather was a graduate of Randolph-Macon College in its early years in Ashland after the move from Boynton, and he became a Methodist minister after he graduated from Randolph-Macon. I don't know what the ministerial preparation that was required in those days was. It may be that the college itself and its graduation from the college was preparation enough to be a minister. But then he, later on in the ministry, became a trustee of the Methodist College, Randolph-Macon, and was an active member of the student body. He was a member of the, for example, of the Phi Delta Theta fraternity, and which is sort of a family connection that runs down through the family in some ways. And but he was a trustee, and he was while he was a trustee, he would when he came to the college to participate in the trustees meetings, which lasted several days, he boarded with Mrs. D.S. Ellis, who was the widow of the college physician, Daniel Ellis, who had died in a sort of a weird accident in Stagg because he was swept down on the Stagg Creek when he was out in the Horseshoe Bend area of the South Anna River to visit a patient, and was drowned when he was only about 55, and his widow had to look after their 6 children, the oldest of whom was just about college age, and so she looked after them by running a boarding house, and Reverend Mr. Ellis was one of her customers, and later on, there is some sort of fascinating interconnections between the college and the Simpson and Ellis families. But at the time, there was this connection. The Simpson and Ellis families were both connected with the college. Mac Simpson, I called him Mac, and he's Mac Simpson, the first Mac Simpson, had been a student. He had been a member of the Phi Delta Theta fraternity, and later became a minister in the Methodist Church and a trustee of the college. Well, then later on, my father, that's Mac.
Also called Mac.
Also called Mac, Mac Jr., came to the college, and he graduated from the college and bounced around from one place to another. I mean, academics do. He went to the University of Virginia to get a master's degree. He majored there I think in mathematics and astronomy. Oh. And then he taught at various places with, I believe, a master's degree. Whether he had a master's degree in both mathematics and astronomy, I don't know. But he, too, had been at Randolph-Macon College. Mm-hmm. And before he went to the University of Virginia, and then from there he taught in a New York college, and then later on in Converse College.
Oh, South Carolina.
South Carolina, and then he went. He decided that I guess that his final final teaching would be in mathematics, and he went to the University of Chicago and got a PhD degree at the University of Chicago, and with a choice facing him between the University of Wisconsin and the University of Texas. He preferred to stay in the South, and he went to Texas. The university assignment was fine, but he didn't like Texas. And after a year, it was in the time of the First World War, he volunteered to serve with the YMCA with the American Expeditionary Force in France. And so he served for a year in France, and then came back, and this brings it to the college, then came back and got off the off the train to find a letter from Robert Emory Blackwell, who was the president of the college at that time, offering him the position to replace Dr. Smithy, for whom the Modern Science Building is named, and he replaced him to teach mathematics. He was the mathematics professor at Macon College.
So he was all coming back home for him, in a way.
It was coming back home for him. There had been one unhappy thing about his tenure at Macon as a student, in that there was one individual in the fraternity, Phi Delta Theta fraternity, who apparently didn't like him, and he had blackballed him from membership in the fraternity, which of course was within his rights, and he did not join the fraternity as he would have liked to have done while he was a student here. He had joined the SAE fraternity at the University of Virginia, and had worked with the management of the regional affairs of the SAE fraternity. Enjoyed it very much later on in his life, but he didn't get the Phi Delta Theta position. He was followed by one of his brothers. He had two brothers, one of whom came to Macon in Ashland and did become a member of Phi Delta Theta. Like my father, he did become involved in college education. That was
Stratford
College.
Was that Grellet?
No, that was John.
John Simpson.
John Simpson.
Okay.
Grellet was my father's first cousin.
Oh, okay.
And he became president much later of Mary Washington College of the University of Virginia, the Women's College of the University of Virginia in Fredericksburg. Grellet and John both were Phi Delta Thetas at Macon, but my father wasn't. And then when I came here as a student, much later, my father didn't marry until he was 44. He got off the boat coming home from World War I, single, and he met one of the employees of the college, my mother, who was from the Ellis family. My mother, Caroline Ellis, who had been a child of 6 when my father was a student at Macon College, had grown up and had come home to help her mother run this boarding house. And she also worked as a secretary to Dr. Hatcher, who was vice president of the college, and my father used to walk her home for lunch at the boarding house that my grandfather had used, and my mother always said that she fell in love with her husband's father first, and then with his son. Later, after he was they married when he was 44 after some years of courtship, and I was born when he was 46 and she was 34, so I was the children of older parents, and that made a big difference, I guess, in my life.
Right.
And certainly made a difference in what the position of my family was in connection
Yes.
with the college.
So talk a little bit about what it was like growing up. Where did you live when you were a child?
Well, we lived right across the street. We lived where the cafeteria now is. Right in the.
So right on the campus, really.
It was on the campus at the corner of Henry Street and Patrick Street.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up at the corner of Patrick and Henry streets, and they tell the story that when I was in the crib, I would turn around to watch the ball games.
Oh,
which were right across
right out the window,
across the street. Yeah,
right.
And but that was that was one of a series of college houses, and the faculty. In one case, the minister of the Duncan Memorial Methodist Church lived in, and but for the most part, it was faculty homes, with one exception, I think, and that's where I grew up.
Yeah. Well,
the first 13 years of my life.
Well, being right on campus, did you, as a child, have much interaction with the Randolph-Macon students?
We did have some. We were in and out underfoot. We were interested in athletics, and my father was connected with the administration of the athletic program, belonged to the athletic committee of the faculty, and was interested in athletics. So we were back and forth to the gymnasium and in the gymnasium and on the athletic field watching football and baseball and track. And my father had helped to do the mathematical work in connection with laying out the track. And there were all kinds of things were done in a sort of a do it an inexpensive way if you can do it right.
Right. When you were a child growing up, was Dr. Moreland the president of the college?
No, Dr. Blackwell.
Dr. Blackwell.
Dr. Blackwell was president.
And do you have any memories of Dr. Blackwell?
Very, very little, really. But I did. But he did visit my parents when I was a baby, and while I don't remember his coming to call on, he did come many nights to visit with my parents when I was just a baby. And later, as I grew up, my mother showed me a letter that he had written to me when I was born, in which he had congratulated me on my choice of parents.
Oh.
Which was sort of interesting to know existed and to read later on, and then to remember, and he it was really something else. The connection with students, you asked about that just a little while ago, but the connection with the students that I most remember was that they knew we existed. There were 3 little boys running around all over the place, and they were active, and they got the nickname from their father's profession on the campus of teaching mathematics. And one of the students gave them the nicknames of sine, cosine, and tangent.
Oh.
And we learned to answer to any name by which we were addressed, sine, cosine, or tangent. And we never knew whether the students knew what they were, which was which, and we didn't make much of a difference in it either. And we remained underfoot until we were old enough to ring the chapel bell at any victory of an athletic team, and so we would run to ring the chapel bell, and if we could beat the students there and ring the chapel bell, well, so much the better for us.
That's right. Oh, that's a great tradition.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was one of the traditions of the college, was that on a victory you could ring the chapel bell And the chapel bell, of course, was the church bell where we went to Sunday school.
That's good.
And things were very, very friendly and good between the college and the community in the town. One of the things there, not personal to our family, but was in a way sort of personal between the college and the community of Ashland, and that the town, I guess it was the town council, took an ad all the time, I think, and I'm not sure whether it was in the Herald Progress, which was the county newspaper, private newspaper, or whether it was the Yellow Jacket. I guess it must have been the Yellow Jacket. Maybe it was both. But anyway, the ad went, Randolph-Macon students are invited to live, love, and learn in Ashland.
That's a great
And lots of the Randolph-Macon people did marry local people. Well, my father, when he became a faculty member, married an Ashland girl who had gone away to teach on the Northern Neck of Virginia, but had come home to help her mother when her father, much later after her father had died, but when she needed, when she herself was getting older, my grandmother, and so they helped her. And then when they got married, my grandmother, Alice, came and lived with us. So that when I was born, my grandmother was a part of the family, at least about 3/4 of the year. Then in the winter months, she went to live with my mother's sister, my Aunt Catherine, in Richmond.
When boarding houses were a big part of life in Ashland and part of the college system. Tell us about the boarding house life.
Well, the boarding houses, by the time that I grew up and was carrying newspapers and getting acquainted with those features, was very different. It was not a boarding house for the most part. It was not a boarding house for the living in that the trustees had experienced, but mostly for food.
Right, meals.
Yeah, that we didn't even have a cafeteria connected with the college. I don't know when that came on the scene. But students.
But there was no cafeteria even when you were a student at Randolph-Macon.
I don't think so. At least not when I started here. All kinds of things were ready to bust loose once we got into a Second World War.
Right. Do you have? Can you tell us a little bit about the town and the college's response to the war?
Well, there were lots of Ashland men who were going away to war, and it's hard for me in that case to sort of talk about the college that I talk about without talking about my life.
Right.
I was a freshman in the fall of 1944 at the college, and I was only 16. I'd graduated. We had a short, 1 year shorter
11
elementary
grades.
and high school arrangement, so that we only had 11 years of school before college.
Right.
And I'd done the 11 years in 10 years, and entered college 16, very young for 16, and so that when I got to the senior year in high school, I just looked ahead to. My family had three boys. They couldn't afford to send three boys on Randolph-Macon salaries to a big university or some other big expensive operation. They sent them Henry Clay High School, right on to Randolph-Macon College. It was just a natural thing to do. And
and you lived at home, presumably.
And I lived at home,
sure,
too,
yeah.
right. And I think I've lost the train of my thought here.
Well, we're talking about World War II, but when you entered as a freshman, it was the fall of 1944. So we were talking about the effect of the war on the college.
Right.
Because
yes.
I know that...
well, that meant that we only had actually about 60 male students and 20 local women. We were not yet a coeducational institution as such, but women were always welcome from the community if they wanted to join the college community. And during the war, we really needed more.
Exactly.
We needed more women.
Right.
And as far as the boys, the men, so to speak, were concerned, they half of them joined a glee club, whether they could sing or not. I was one of those who couldn't sing, but we had a William Troxell as our director, and we had gotten acquainted with him in the high school band, and I played the cymbals in the band. I could make a lot of noise, even if I couldn't sing. And so, in any event, we managed to carry on.
Because the numbers were very, very low in the war years when all of the young men had, gone off to war.
Well, think of it. We had less than 100 students for 2 or 3 years, and today we've got 10, 15 times, maybe 20 times as many students. And today we not only have male students, but we have a coeducational institution, which makes a good many differences, I'm sure, to the events on the campus and the activities of the students.
When you were a student, during those years, do you remember anything about the Army Specialist Training Unit when they had the agreement, when the soldiers, I think it was after the war that training was going on rather than during the war?
Right, and the memories I do have a lot, in large part shaped by the fact that I was a faculty child.
Right.
And particularly in the war, by that time, my father had become dean, and he was dean of faculty and dean of students, which meant he was the disciplinary authority for students. And that put him in a, and he was a graduate of the college. He was able to go to Washington and talk to some people he had known as students or maybe classmates at college who were then in the military and were able to help get some of these programs. And they did manage to do that. And so the college it survived in part because of the military.
Well, that was
programs.
very important. And then I guess when the soldiers came back from after the war, there was the GI Bill, which enabled lots of them to go to college.
Right.
Well, when you were a student at Randolph-Macon, your father was dean, as you mentioned. Were there any experiences you had where being the son of the dean was uncomfortable or made you feel singled out, or expectations?
I never felt that, but as a student. But I did find out once I got to the point of being a student at the college, not right away, but toward graduation, I found out that there had been a little bit of irritation among some of my fellow teammates in football. I loved football, and my brothers did too. But I did hear one of the coaches say, in my presence, that there was some irritation on the part of some of our teammates that we were being too favorably treated, in the chance to play.
Oh, but you hadn't picked up on that.
No, I hadn't. I hadn't
people
picked up on it. Never did pick up on it, and I went ahead and I did play and get playing time as a member of the B squad.
Yeah.
And I was quarterback on the B squad, and my hands were very small and still are, and I could hardly grip the football to throw a forward pass, so I had to be smart enough to call the right plays, and then I had to be able to handle the ball so that I didn't fumble all over the place. Right. And I did these things effectively, apparently, and the coaches were convinced that that I deserved to play, and so they let me play. Yeah. And they took some criticism, maybe, but it never fell on me.
Right. Did you ever take any classes with your father as a professor?
Oh, yes. And
tell us about that.
I actually majored in mathematics as an undergraduate.
Okay.
And, I took classes with my father. Every once in a while something would happen that, for example, once my father wanted to illustrate some mathematical question with gambling, the probabilities in gambling. Right. And he said he made some such comment as this: maybe some of you know more about this than I do. And I raised my hand and spoke up, and everybody laughed.
He said, "I certainly know more about it than you do." That's good.
So those kinds of things did happen, but I don't know. It seems to me that I loved the extracurricular activities. I was involved in all the activities that went on, and I did get nominated to be in the Phi Delta Theta fraternity. I was a legacy from my grandfather and my uncles, and from Gillette. Gillette was, by this time, he was in, and he was not always on campus those years, but he was the advisor for Phi Delta Theta when he was there on the campus. And so I had,
And you enjoyed the activities with the fraternity?
Oh, yes.
Good.
Very much so. And I was treasurer of the fraternity. Handled those jobs all right to suit my fraternity brothers.
Were there any other faculty children attending Randolph-Macon at the time?
Oh,
you knew
I think so. Yeah, I'm sure there were. Edward and plenty of faculty had been students of the college. Right. Growing up, when I was a real young child, I really didn't always get things straight, but I remember one of the things that was so amusing that happened in the family was that, and this came up in the conversation just today at lunch, we had one of the people who handled the custodial duties of the college, and I made some reference to him as Dr. Taylor, and my mother corrected me and said, "Well, he's not a doctor." And I said, "Well, he's married, isn't he?" I was so thoroughly acquainted with the fact that the professors all had. They were all called doctors, and they all had wives, and I probably must not have known much about other faculties, and so I somehow come to the conclusion that if you got married, you got a PhD.
Oh, some people think you need one, I guess.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good. Well, before we move on from your student days, or when we can touch on this too, when you came back to the college, but I am interested in any memories you have of Dr. Moreland as president, but we might touch on that in your later relationship to the college. When you graduated in 1949, tell us what you did then.
Well, I really need to go back and say that I served I was a freshman here when we had very few men.
Right.
I then went into the Navy along with some other classmates at the end of my freshman year.
Okay.
And then I served a full year. They dropped the atom bomb on Hiroshima about a week after I actually joined the Navy. And much to my surprise, and in some ways to my disappointment, that I couldn't get in and do my share of the fighting. But the war was over, and so I came back to the college and entered my sophomore year. And that was at the time when much more mature students, much more mature men were coming back from the service. And so those of us who were younger, we had to really compete to find a place in the extracurricular activities of the college, particularly. But in general, but we also had the advantage of the maturity that these students brought to the campus and to the competitive activities, intercollegiate as well as intramural. Intercollegiate being between different colleges, and intramural being between the different fraternities or dormitory teams or whatever. So it was a fascinating time to be in college, and the GI Bill was changing the structure of college and university education in this country.
It gave so many more people the opportunity to go who never would have. Right. I know my father went to college on the GI Bill and probably would not have gone otherwise. So you had these men coming back from the war and more mature, and that's when the college, I think, for the first time had married student housing.
Right.
That was a new, a new type of student who were married and settled. And that certainly affected, I'm sure, the extracurricular life if folks were married, or some portion of them were. Their campus life will be different.
Yeah, it certainly did. And in fraternities, for example, you had this, instead of having 16-year-olds to 20-year-olds, you had 16-year-olds to up to 26-year-olds or 30-year-olds.
And some of these a little bit more mature students, you were saying, were good athletes and were coming back and taking over some of the teams, and that's
right.
I interviewed President Wright a while back, and he was telling the opposite story, or the beginning of that story. He was a freshman when World War II broke out, and so many of the students immediately left to join up, and he said that for those early years of the war, the students who were not athletic were able to really have a chance to play on all the teams. And so then after the war, I guess the pendulum swung the other way.
Yeah, I guess it did. And you mentioned Luther White. Luther White was my big brother in the fraternity that I joined. And,
okay.
And then later became president of the college. And and then by that time, I don't know, I'm trying to remember. He didn't become president until after Dr. Moreland left.
Right. He became president, right.
So he was an upperclassman when I came back from the service for my sophomore, junior, and senior years, and was a very active figure on the campus himself, and I was lucky to be his little brother in the fraternity. And then Dr. Moreland, all this time, was the president. And he's the one who invited me to come back and be an instructor in philosophy with a master's degree in philosophy. And then after I'd had 2 years of teaching philosophy, I decided that I would prefer to work with students who were a little more practically oriented, as in government, politics, economics. And so I wanted the perfect job, I guess. Anyway, I went to Johns Hopkins and got a PhD in not in mathematics, not in philosophy, but in government and politics. Political science is the term that was used, and spent my career teaching political science at the University of Tennessee.
Well, let's go back just a little bit about when you came back. You went and got a master's degree in philosophy at the University of Chicago,
Right.
following your father's footsteps. Then
He went to Chicago and got his PhD there. I was following my father's footsteps.
And then, how did you happen to come back to Randolph-Macon to teach? How did that play out?
Dr. Moreland invited me to come back as an instructor.
Right.
Without a PhD degree.
And you worked with Dr. Panel?
Yes.
And
in his department. That became a department. The
Right.
two of us were constituted the department of
Right.
philosophy.
Can you talk about what it was like to come back to campus and be on the other side of the classroom?
Oh, I already knew a little bit about that. I had my senior year in college. I gave up football and taught at the high school, the local high school, Henry Clay High School, in freshman mathematics, which was really mostly arithmetic, and advanced advanced high school mathematics. And I also helped coach the football team in high school. And that was a good experience.
And that was Henry Clay High School.
Henry Clay High School.
Where you had gone to.
Where I'd been a student. But now I was, instead of being, by this time I was, my senior year in college, I was around 20 to 21. And of course I'd had military service. And I'd also, because when the men went away to war, the boys who stayed at home became the scoutmasters. Jim Mahog and I were scoutmasters of the scout troop. So I knew a lot of these high school students from my experience with them. Well, that was while I was teaching. And so I got acquainted with the high school system of education, and I knew that I wanted to work at if I wanted to stay in teaching, or if I wanted to go into teaching, I would prefer to go with older students.
Right.
But I already knew some of those students who had advanced from high school to Randolph-Macon.
Randolph-Macon, right.
Some of them, of course, had gone on right on through.
Right. Well, when you were an instructor, was your father still the dean?
He was. I think he had retired as dean, but was still teaching mathematics.
He was still teaching. So you were colleagues, but he was not your boss.
Something like that. He may have been for a while, but anyway, he knew how to handle that sort of thing. When we went in the parade, that the instructors have at graduation exercises, he made some wisecrack about the Alpha and Omega. In the procession, the Simpsons represent Alpha and Omega in the.
Oh, that's good. Well, what about your brothers? Did your brothers come to Randolph-Macon as well?
Yeah, when I went away to war as a freshman, and I came back, and I lost a year, and so when I was a sophomore, I was there alone. Had been the freshman year and the sophomore year. When I was a junior, my next brother became a freshman, and when I was a senior, my next brother became a freshman, and my the middle brother became a sophomore.
Right,
So we were
right.
all three of us boys were on the campus at the same time. And there was another family from Harrisonburg, Virginia, who had a similar situation.
Uh-huh.
And in their case, they were the Gibbons boys, and they were in the same. I think they were not exactly the same. Two of them were in the same class with me, and one of them was in the same class with my freshman brother.
Uh-huh.
And that was really sort of interesting,
Yeah.
in a variety of ways. And it became more interesting later on in life as our interests shifted, and we found ourselves running across these Gibbons brothers, and sometimes one, sometimes another, in different places.
Uh-huh.
And we had the background of Randolph-Macon, and it was really interesting.
Mm-hmm. Did either of your brothers go into academic careers?
No, not really, no. My next brother went into physics and went into nuclear engineering, spent his lifetime in nuclear engineering. The other brother went into accounting and spent his life in the accounting field, developed a partnership, and he was the senior partner.
Well, then when you began teaching at University of Tennessee, what was your relationship like with the college once you had settled in at University of Tennessee as a career? Did you, because Ashland was still your hometown,
Right.
and you are an alumnus. So talk a little bit about how you stayed connected with the college through the years.
Well, my family for a long time. My father died the week after I took the office in Knoxville with the University of Tennessee. But it was interesting, his former student who had succeeded him as professor of mathematics at Randolph-Macon had come to Randolph-Macon from the University of Tennessee after having graduated in undergraduate work at Randolph-Macon.
Oh, okay.
And so we had that kind of connection. My mother stayed here in Ashland for 10 years, keeping up the house that we had lived in, which was not
the one on campus.
Not the one on campus, but it was over on College Avenue, just a block away from the campus. And she had stayed at that house, so I visited here when I visited her. And one of my brothers came back to Virginia. One of them went to the West Coast, and so I couldn't see much of him from Tennessee exactly.
Yeah.
And I was developing my own family,
Right.
and not as big as my parents' both families, but it kept me busy anyway, and so it wasn't a real close, but it was a sort of an unusual relationship with the college. And I guess that's been maintained from the time I matriculated in the college to the present.
Right.
That I am known pretty quickly as not as the third Mac, but as the third T. McNider Simpson.
That's right. That's quite a name around here.
Quite a name.
to live up to and to carry.
Yeah.
Well, can you think of any, if you were writing the history of Randolph-Macon College, what would be the key things you would include from your lifetime and experience? What would you think would be the most significant things for the history of the college?
That's a strong question. Could we take a break?
That'd be fine.
And then we'll come back to that.
That would be fine. Chord, I had the wrong.
Well, during my lifetime, I think the most interesting events in the life of the college have been very much tied to the most interesting events in the life of the country, of the United States. And the events that have been determinative of the history of the entire world. Because if you stop to think about them, I was born in 1928. The Great Crash came down upon us in 1929. There was a depression. We got ourselves out of the depression by going to war. Not that we started the war, but when Hitler, so to speak, started the war, when Britain and France and then the United States came into it soon enough, too soon to suit many of the people who had to leave college and go to war, or waited until they had gone to war to go to college, or it changed the customs of higher education by coming to college when they got out of the war and had a GI Bill to pay their way. And of course, when you think about the end of the war, you really think about not just the fact that people came home, but what is it that ended the war? And what ended the war was the dropping of an atom bomb and the development of a whole new technique of warfare. And certainly that has influenced the world, not just in terms of the possibility of another war in which nuclear arms might be used, but in terms of nuclear developments for public power and energy, for medical research, and all the kinds of things that have got to be considered there. And then there was also the fact that you entered a Cold War, which really meant that it really meant something much more specific and different from the entry to World War II. The Cold War was a war between Russia and the societies that might align themselves one way or another with Russia, and the United States and the societies that might orient themselves to the country that had gone to war in Europe, gone across the ocean to get to the war, and without whom the war could not have been won. And the Cold War went on for 30 years, 35 or 40 years. And then we had the end of the Cold War, and historians are still wrestling with what that means historically. So that the history of the college in this 20th century and on into the beginning of the 21st century is the history. It's a history of the planet. At the beginning of a new phase of world history. And certainly all of those things need to be taken into account. And I think the spirit of Randolph-Macon College, as alive as it is right now, must reflect some strengths in the college. And so one who would be trying to write this kind of history would be looking for the strengths of the college and trying to be sensitive to them, and also to consider whether they have not at the same time been some weaknesses, and whether the people who have been most intimately associated with the college they certainly are not going to be the people who are going to be the best help. You need to get you need to get an expression of strengths and weaknesses from people who are intimately concerned with college from different points of view. But you certainly need to maintain some perspective, some objectivity in looking at those items.
Well, how about if any memories that you would like to share? Anything that this has made you think of? Any anecdotes or stories in closing? Do you want to hold your...
Well, I think that going through this last few days, when the old grads have met as a Boynton Society, which is in itself designed to take away the idea of the oldness.
Old, right?
Yeah, the graduates who have lived through this 80 years have been sharing these intimate experiences with each other, and I don't think there's any one I would pick among half a dozen that I might be thinking of choosing. Let's see whether I could give you half a dozen. One, for example, is the guy who got elected president of the Boynton Society. The old grads started college as a freshman the same year I did. We were starting in a year when the college had become a sort of a training camp for some kinds of military activities, and had then lost all of these possibilities with the end of the war sort of approaching in some sense. And but we were in a situation that the college had never been in before and hasn't been in since. And he and I played football together. Neither one of us had much skill as football players, and certainly we did not have much size and strength, which we needed or could have used anyway. And he stayed on. I went into the Navy at the end of my first year. He went to summer school. He got through in 2 years before I did. I came back, but his career was totally different from mine as a student.
Right.
And then he went off and had his own history, and here he is. Here he is, the one who's elected president for the next few years of this society. And I went home, and I didn't even dress to. I didn't wear my robes which I could have worn.
Right.
I have academic robes, which I could have worn, but I didn't wear them. I didn't go to the graduation, and I didn't go to hear the speaker this afternoon. Here I am talking about history of college.
Well, it was a wonderful ceremony this morning, and it really reminds us of the traditions of the college, to go to a commencement ceremony and to see the old grads, Boynton Society process, and the faculty and the students, and know that, year in and year out, there's a fresh crop of RMC alums, graduates becoming alums. We really do see the march of history, or you feel it when you go to a graduation.
Well, you and I, Lynda, we could do a lot better, We could do a lot worse than talk to each other several times during getting started on an outline for a history than either one of us could do by himself or herself.
Right.
You would certainly emphasize, I think, you would emphasize the fact that it's now a co-educational institution, whereas it was Randolph-Macon Men's College, and Randolph-Macon Men's College was accompanied by Randolph-Macon Women's College. Now you've got Randolph-Macon College. It's still Randolph-Macon College, but it's co-educational.
Right.
And you've got Randolph-Macon Women's College, and it's now Randolph College because it can't be Randolph-Macon Women's College if it's going to be co-educational.
Right.
So you've got two colleges that started out as sort of sister institutions that are no longer, in any sense, sister institutions.
Right.
One of them's just Randolph, and one of them's Randolph-Macon, and what is their historical?
Yeah.
What is that historical differences? I have to say, with my father, by the way, had 4 sisters, and all of them went to Randolph-Macon.
Oh, really? Is that
Women's
right?
College. And my mother went to Randolph-Macon Women's College.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and Randolph-Macon, the fact that they had been sister institutions really didn't have anything to do with their getting together, and getting married, and having 3 boys, who none of whom could go to the Women's College. Both of them could go to either Randolph College or Randolph-Macon College now.
Right. Now.
So that's a partial answer to your question. You want to phrase it a different way?
No, I just wanted to give you a chance to remember any other special memories of people or places or events in the life of the college as you've experienced that you wanted to share.
I would. Well, there's one other thing at least that I would like to say. I would think that if anybody's writing a history of the college, they should read Scanlon's history of Randolph-Macon College. I understand he's got a new book out.
Well, the draft is done. It's going to the publisher, I believe, but it's in draft form.
Right.
And it goes up until 2005. It's 1968 to 2005.
1968. Why would he start there?
Well, the first volume is from the beginning of the college to 1967. And this second history picks the story up in 1968 and brings it to 2005.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. I think if I were writing a history, I would read Scanlon's the past book that he wrote, and then the current book. And I would ask, what did he capture in both of them that was needed? And what didn't he capture? And my guess is that we would find that it could use another writer, not because of anything he might have done wrong, but because history is so complex, and the history of the world that we have lived through in the last 80 years. And you haven't lived for 80 years, but
a good part of that.
But you lived a good part of it. And there are a lot of people who have. And they do. There is a great deal of love and joy in the celebration of its history. And I would try to find what that is, and what it is between people who were here at the same time. And some of them are looking back at just a short distance, but some of them are looking back a long way, and you would want to get you would want to get a sampling. Oral history has a real advantage over individual history, I think.
Well, that's what we've really tried to do in this project, and it's been really moving to hear people remember from so many different points of view. And many of the people I've interviewed have been like yourself, can see the college from several angles. But most of our interviews have been pairs of people, so that we've gotten 2 perspectives immediately. And that back and forth, like you're saying, has been very fruitful.
I would go back, you want some specifics. One thing that I found myself awfully glad I had said to somebody today, and I can't remember who it was, but I referred to the fact that for years the town council took out an ad in the Herald progress maybe in the Yellow Jacket, almost certainly, saying Randolph-Macon students are invited to live, love, and learn in Ashland. And I think that has perhaps reflected a town-gown relationship that has been extremely valuable to the town and to the college.
Well, they're both so connected to each other, you really can't separate them in a way. Yeah. Ashland from the town. Ashland from the college.
Well, the college was built because of the railroad, because of the railroad running through here. But imagine a railroad town becoming a college town is sort of far-fetched. Your railroads go through the town and they shake the galvanometers, and the students make a joke out of that, and but it's not exactly perfect for the academic world to have the galvanometers shaking when you're trying to get accurate measures of stability or accurate bases of stability to work with.
Well, Max Simpson, I want to thank you very much for coming and sharing your memories today with Macon Memories. And I hope that we will see you on campus again before too long.
I'll be back, and I'd like to continue this conversation.
I hope we can do that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Lynda.